Hello, my name is Sarah, and this is my Prezi presentation on the different perspectives of learning. Um, First, we'll start with constructivism. Constructivism is defined as people constructing their own knowledge and understanding of the world through experiencing things and reflecting on those experiences. So this type of learning is based on observation of the study of how people learn. Learning teaches learning when talking about constructivism. Students should be focusing on hands-on activities and assessing and reflecting on their work or their peers' work. Um, when students assess and reflect on their own work and they are learning how to learn, so they might find that they could come up with a different strategy for to fully understand a concept. Maybe they're figuring out, why did I get this answer wrong? Why did I get this answer right? And then going from there. Um, just like it says in the name, students are constructing their own knowledge. So if I were to go about this approach of teaching, I would like to have a lot of experiments, trial and errors, and reflecting. I believe personally that when students reflect on their work, they take more away from the lesson because they're understanding what went wrong and what went right, and how can they manipulate different variables to come to a different conclusion or to come to the right solution. Um, if students are just completing their assignments and not really reflecting on how they did it or how they came to this answer, what are they really getting out of it? They're just completing the work. Motivation for constructivism is defined as the internal state that activates, guides, and maintains behavior. And then intrinsic motivation is doing something because it is interesting and or enjoyable. So with that said, a student could feel pleasure in when they learn something new and complete a challenging task. Students will be more willing to complete activities if they know that they can feel a sense of pleasure or accomplishment, that they completed something that they didn't already have previous knowledge of. Confidence is key in intrinsic motivation, and confidence just is naturally self-rewarding. It's important to keep the children engaged in the activity and to keep their spirits high. Intrinsic motivation can be increased by 4 different factors: challenging, curiosity, fantasy, and control. When you challenge students, it gives them a sense of accomplishment. Like I said earlier, they become confident when they complete a challenging task. Curiosity can increase students' motivation because it keeps them interested in the lesson. It keeps them engaged. It helps them. They want to see the results of a lesson. Fantasy, because they're triggering their imagination. They can compare imagination or fantasy ideas with the real world. And control can give students self-determination when they have control of their own behavior and their own actions. And then moving on to eccentric motivation is doing something because it has a separate outcome. This is like giving students a reward when they're finished with a task, like verbally praising students is probably the most common eccentric motivation type. And personal goals of for motivating students, it kind of ties in with the eccentric motivation piece, the control piece of it, because like I said earlier, students are more likely to succeed when they're in control of their own behavior. They want to meet that personal goal for themselves. Okay, behaviorism. When thinking, all behavior can be explained without the need to consider internal mental states or consciousness. So when thinking like a behaviorist in the classroom with learning, each student starts with a so-called clean slate, and every student's behavior is shaped through positive and negative reinforcement. This type is more focused on the authority of the teacher and how they're able to modify behaviors of their students. Positive and negative reinforcement increase the likelihood of a behavior happening again. Positive reinforcement, pretty simple to understand, just giving a student a reward for doing something good or for practicing the desired behavior. Negative reinforcement is taking something that is undesirable away. So, like for instance, if students are complaining about how they're not ready to take a test, extending or postponing the test date would be the reward. And then positive and negative punishment decrease the likelihood of a behavior reoccurring. So a positive punishment is the application of a negative consequence after an undesired behavior has taken place. So for example, if a student is wearing a hat in class, they will be scolded and forced to take it off. So them being scolded and the student having to take their hat off is their punishment. Negative punishment is when a desired item is removed after an undesired behavior occurs. So for example, misbehaving, if a student is misbehaving or talking out of turn, they will lose their token for the day, or they will lose their sticker or whatever reward incentive is used in that classroom. Okay, this is a picture of classical conditioning. It is the act of reflex learning, so you're trying to shape a new behavior. So you take the neutral stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus and combine them, and then when you remove the unconditioned stimulus and just practice with the conditioned stimulus, you will get the desired result. Operant conditioning is the reinforcement based on if there is any evidence or not of the repeated behavior. So if a student is being reinforced by not talking out of turn, the reward should be something that motivates them. So this is super important to know your students, know what do they like, what do they not like, what could you use as a punishment, what could you use as a reinforcer. So you can keep them in check to make sure that they are following what they should be doing by giving rewards that they are actually interested in. And every student is going to be different. Every student isn't going to have the same type of reward. And then these are the ABCs of behavior. I just wanted to put this picture in here because we talked a lot about it in my bed behavior modification class. So the antecedent leads to the behavior leads to the consequence, and the consequence again then leads to the antecedent. So it's just a cycle. Um, the antecedent, what's triggering the behavior, what is happening right before the undesired behavior, or and then what leads to that student acting out, what's the trigger. So with all of those reinforcements and shaping said, it's super important to have a schedule of reinforcement and be consistent with it. The student should know how often, well, how is it going to be a random reinforcement? Is it going to be every single time the student does the desired behavior, they are going to be reinforced every single time, which each situation is different, because reinforcing good behavior every time is not very beneficial for the learner. I have a story from me working at a daycare. This little boy would always he wouldn't pick up his toys and he would leave. And so one day we tried, we would bring him over to his mess and show him, like, say, hey, like, where does this go? Put it back. And when he finally picked up on it, he would put a toy away and we would all clap. So, and we did it every single time he put a toy away, and he loved it, but it eventually faded out after a week because he just got tired of us clapping every time. It just got old for him. So and then this is just a video of the schedules of reinforcement, the different types of schedules of reinforcement. Okay, motivation when talking about behaviorism is based off positive and negative reinforcement in the classroom. For my classroom that I was placed at, she used the app called Dojo, the Classroom Dojo app. And this is just a short video clip of what the app is all about. And she would be handing out dojos all day, good and bad, for good behavior, bad behavior. Good behavior examples would be like participation, like sharing. Bad behaviors would be talking out of turn, not prepared for class, stuff like that. And when I was reading up on this, on motivation for behaviorists, it surprised me because it said that the behaviorists believe motivation is biological, so we're not born with motivation, and we need reinforcers to develop our motivation, which I thought was interesting because I thought about infants and how they cry when they're hungry or when they need their diaper changed, and that to me is like a natural instinct for infants to cry when they need something, and then their reward is being fed or being changed. So I just kind of wonder what would happen if they were never rewarded. Would they just be completely neglected? Short-term motivation. Classroom rewards help motivate students. Not every single student is going to be interested in the lesson. So it's good to have short little, like little rewards for students to help them fulfill the goal of the classroom or the goal of the lesson. There are negatives to this approach because they can be completing an assignment correctly, but that doesn't mean that they fully understand what they just completed. They just simply completed the assignment like they were supposed to, just for the sake of getting a reward at the end. Verbal praise, super important in the classroom and should be consistent with every student. Students are more likely to learn answers more effectively if they are being praised for being correct.